When I tell people that I have a Mac sitting on my desk at home, they always think that I'm talking about the iMac. It's one of the most beautiful looking series of computers in my opinion. Great screens, vivid colors, sleek metal finish. But that's not my Mac. This is my Mac. It's the Macintosh SE30, released in 1989. It's a relic from my father's college days. Now, you might think that this dinosaur of a computer is pointless, or funny even, but to explain why it's on my desk, I have to tell you a story. So every computer comes with a piece of hardware called the CPU. It does all the math equations that your computer needs to run. Combined with other factors, the speed of these calculations are largely determined on transistors. Now, for the point of this talk, you really don't have to know what they are. Just understand that more transistors usually equals a better CPU, usually equals a faster computer. This specific Macintosh contains the Motorola 68030. It's a CPU capable of processing with the power of 273,000 transistors. It's enough power for me to play the original SimCity on when I'm bored. So here's a fun question. Take out your phone. How many transistors do you think its CPU has? On one hand, it fits in your pocket, so it's much smaller, but it's also 30 years younger than my Mac. So 500,000? A million? 2 million even? Well, if you're holding a modern Android smartphone, like the Samsung Galaxy S10, you're looking at 6.7 billion transistors worth of power. And if you're holding a modern iPhone, like the iPhone 11, try a staggering 8.5 billion transistors worth of power. In 30 years, we've gone from less than 500,000 to multi-billion transistor CPUs. And it's all thanks to this man, Gordon E. Moore. Moore is a very smart individual on his own right. He's an accomplished person with a minor in physics, a PhD in chemistry, and he's also one of the founding fathers of Intel, the company that makes up 93% of the desktop CPUs we use today. But this talk isn't about Moore and his accomplishments. It's about a paper that Moore published on the 19th of April, 1969. Cramming More Components on Integrated Circuits was its title, and it made a bold claim. The complexity for minimum component costs has increased at a rate of roughly a factor of 2 per year. Certainly over the short term, this rate can be expected to continue if not to increase more. Moore predicted that in his paper, every 2 years, computing speed would double. And over time, he speculated that even though the material for CPUs, silicon, was to stay the same, he also thought that the price of manufacturing those CPUs would drop, allowing for more research on how to fit more transistors onto a single chip. And he was right, which is impressive for 3 reasons. One, we actually did double computing power every 2 years pretty consistently. That's my Mac CPU up there on the graph. 2, many publications at the time said that this prediction was rock solid. Many magazines referred to Moore's law as though if it was inexorable, a technological law with the assurance of Newton's law of motion. Britannica. And 3, maybe the most impressive reason, was the fact that he was even right at all. Moore eventually went on to explain that he had blindly extrapolated his prediction on nothing more than basic lab results at the time. Even with how smart Moore was, his law could be summed up as an educated guess. But here in the year 2020, does the law still hold up? Not really. Even Moore himself said in a recent interview that the growth can't continue forever. It is the nature of exponential functions, he said. They eventually hit a wall. So I'm sorry if I got your hopes up for another few years of explosive technological growth. We've just passed the threshold where Moore's law can be upheld. And if you bought a new computer or computer parts within the past few years, you've definitely felt this threshold being met. A study by economists at Stanford and MIT have calculated that the research effort going into upholding Moore's law has risen by a factor of 18 times since 1971. Rotman. CPUs are just getting more expensive every year for diminishing results. And besides the price point, transistors generate heat. And we've gotten to the point where we can't cram more components onto integrated circuits without taking care of the massive heat generation problem. So, what happens now? Well, I think we can learn a few things from Moore's law. Even though it was founded on a guess, it ended up being true. But why? Well, it's because computer companies decided that it should be that way. They used Moore's prediction to gauge their own performance. You see, the world of computer production is much like an arms race. Each company heavily competes with each other for the part of the market share, especially at the time when Moore published his paper. And in order to outperform each other, Intel, AMD, Motorola, and all the other CPU companies made Moore's Law the standard that they tried to strive for, to keep customers and manufacturers buying the newest CPU for the best performance every year. Even with Moore's Law being a blind extrapolation, it ended up benefiting the advancement of computer science significantly in the past 50 years. So, who really cares if he was extrapolating? In science fiction, there's a common trope called the butterfly effect. It's based on real, difficult-to-understand math, but the gist of it is, changing one thing in the past could potentially change a significant portion of the future. I believe Moore's Law to be so important that I think if we were somehow able to alter the past, and someone erased Gordon's original paper from existence, there would be a good chance that we'd still be talking on brick-sized phones, and the newest SimCity game would still look like this. At the time of this talk, we're going through some pretty unprecedented times. Sometimes it's hard to feel like you can make a change in the world. And it's for that reason why I keep that old Macintosh on my desk. Is it practical for everyday use? No, not really. But it does remind me of the significant progress we've made in science and technology. And it especially reminds me that anyone can make a difference. I don't think Moore's Law was a fluke. I think it was a stretch from a very smart individual who put his faith in his advancement of the technology. And even recently, the field of quantum computing is destroying previously known speed barriers of today's computers, so we might just see the resurgence of his law at some point or another. But maybe, if we want to change the future, we should start making some more educated guesses. We should encourage the growth of our scientific and tech communities with optimism. We should set more goals and hold ourselves accountable to specific deadlines in order to ensure the progression of technology into the future. Let's make sure we're progressing, even if the goals are small. And who knows, maybe if you make good enough guesses, you too could get your own self-titled law. Thank you for coming to